Welcome back.
Ladies and gentlemen, Deucez.
Step aside.
I'm Chris, aka Deucez, and today we're going to be going over my Ableton template. Alright, we're now here in Ableton. So there's a few things that we're going to kind of go over first. So first and foremost, I have it set to 145 BPM. And to give you guys a for instance on like how you would even save this is if you go into your options and then preferences, you can go to file folder and then you could save the current set as default. So you could have this be your new project. And that's where I'd like to have you guys at today. So this setup that I currently use helps me with creation, and not only that, but also in a timely manner. Because I already have my drums laid out and some of my favorite drums already picked and filled in into this drum rack. But I also have like my kick, snares, you know, the drums. And I have that in a nice little group so I can be a little bit more organized. And then I have a group for my effects. And if you guys don't know how to make groups, I'll show you that real quick. So you can make an audio track with Control T, or you can always right click and insert audio track. Same thing with MIDI, it would be Control Shift T though, and you can right click and hit MIDI track. But if you want to make a group, you highlight the tracks that you want to make into a group. So let's say we want these two right here. So we would click on one, hold Control, and add the other one. Now if there's a whole bunch of them, you can even click the one on top, hold Shift, and click the one all the way at the bottom that you want to be a part of this group. Then you would go from there and you would go Control G, or if we go back one, let's see here, highlight those, you can right click and group tracks. And there we go, we have a nice little group, and that can be, you know, whatever we want to name it, whatever section or part of the song that we are utilizing. So now from there I have my main bass, which I just have a blank serum so that way I can start on some sound design. And then I also have a sub bass, which is my go-to sub bass that I use, which I should actually resave this because I have this like this weird cut all the way at the end, but I've been actually turning that off in some of my like newer productions just because it has this like weird kind of tone and I'm not really fond of it. And then I have these weird EQs, but that's just because of the key that I'm usually in, and I like to kind of EQ some of the tone. But other than that, I also have these like time stamps or time markers here, which you can do once you kind of like roll up here, and you're not at the magnifying glass, you're not at the like arrow, you're at this little kind of like speaker looking thing. You can hit right click. Then you can add what's called a locator, and you can drag that around, put it wherever you want. And if, let's say, you're playing a section of a song, it'll go to that section if you click on it with the timing you set by this little drop down menu over here. So if we have 1 bar set, that means it would play 1 bar and then go to this if we've clicked on it. But let's go ahead and delete that. And let me kind of go over a little bit of the structure of why I have these timestamps where I have them. So first things first, obviously, intro. That's where we put our intro. And then this kind of structure is more towards Riddim, and because of that, it is only a 16 measure or 16 bar intro / build. Then that would go into your hook / drop, which then for Riddim, typically your typical Riddim drop is about 32 measures long, so that's why I have that. And then of course I kind of skipped over build, but build is 8 measures, with 7 measures being the actual build, 1 measure being your pre-drop vocal. There's some people that have like a 2 measure pre-drop vocal. I mean, it's kind of up to you and how you want to structure your track, but either way you want to try to keep it to that 8 bars. So we got the 8 bars, we got this 32 here, then we go into what would be our second verse. Now this is where I tend to sometimes actually move things around a bit, and I like to have that second verse be a little bit longer, just to kind of give it a little bit more room for expression and a little bit more musicality. But for this sake, we have 8 measures of second verse, then another 8 bars for the second build, and then of course another 32 bars for the second drop. Then that's where we go into the outro, which can be 8 bars, 16, 32, you know, whatever you want it to be. I just like to make mine a little bit more shorter. Sometimes I'll even actually have it to where the last 8 is actually another build. So that way it's nice and easy for a DJ to go to another song. But now that we've gone over that, we can go to the next little spot here, which is going to be our return tracks. And I think I should probably go over this a little bit. Not just the structure of it, but how they work. So how a return track works is instead of using a track itself and putting an effect on it, let's say like a reverb, and we put this on here and, you know, set the time and all that jazz, that means that this channel is now wet in and of itself. Instead, we would send it to a return track. And the reason I use those is because you want to also have everything in your mix that has effects on it, like reverb, delay, like a longer reverb, echo, anything of that nature. You want it to be in the same room. You want it to be in the same track together. And that's why we utilize what's called a return track. So what we do is we send it, because that's what these right here. Some people always ask, like, what are these like ints under here? Those are sends. And that means you're sending input to what would be your return track. So I'd be sending negative 15 decibels of the sound itself directly to the return track. So if I turn this sidechain off, and I'll go over that in a minute, we can now actually hear that there is some reverb. And same goes for our next one, which would be delay. And our next one is a longer reverb. Then we also have a long delay. So now to go over what these are. So our short reverb that I use personally, and I will typically set my send to anywhere from negative 15 to negative 12. My reverb is set up like this, and lately I've actually been turning down the input processing to about 250 hertz instead of that 356, I think is where that was. But I cut some of the lows because you don't really want like a whole bunch of like thunderous lows in your reverb, because then you can start getting into some weird kind of complications and mastering issues. Spin is pretty much just set to default. Quality is set to high, but one of the big things for me is I change my size and my stereo. Stereo I change for one huge reason is the fact that there's no point to have it at 100, because at 100 it starts getting out of phase and you don't want that. So that's why I changed it to 90, and sometimes I'll even change it to 80 depending on how I want my mix down to sound. Size is just the size of the room of the reverb, and I typically tend to put this at 20. Sometimes I'll make it even smaller because I want more of a small roomed reverb. Now my decay time I have set to 1350, because I know that's one thing people have asked too, and it gets a little confusing. Some of the effects in Ableton you have to write out with an extra 0, because if I just put 1.35, that's going to go down to 200 milliseconds because it thinks I'm trying to go to 1.35 milliseconds, meaning our timing on here is set in milliseconds, so we have to account for that. So 1350 would actually be 1.35 seconds. Diffusion network, this is something that is a little odd, but it's for your taste. If you want a reverb that sounds like it's wide open, and let me give you a for instance here. It's nice and clear, there's a lot of high end, or you can kind of bring it down. That sounds like it's more like a closed door in that room. And that's something that you kind of have to mess around with and find what you like. It also depends on the track as well. Like sometimes if you're working on something that's a little bit more clicky and more lasery, maybe even a little bit more bleepy bloopy, then it might be cooler to actually cut off some of those highs. Alright, so the chorus, that again is set to default. Our reflect, diffuse are both at 0. We don't really mess with those. And then dry wet is set to 100%, and that would be because we would want the dry signal that's coming from our send to be 100% wet. And then density and scale are turned all the way down. I don't really like messing with those, and I tend to hear a little bit more like echoing instead of reverb, and I don't really want that. So that's why I have those set to that. Then I have my typical sidechain, which would be on half notes because that's where my drums are usually placed. And then I have this same exact sidechain on every single one of these return tracks. Of course, at times I do have to automate it to be on and off in certain spots. Like in the intro/build, sometimes I have to automate it. Sometimes I even have to duplicate it and change the timing. Because the MIDI, like trying to set it up with MIDI to trigger it, I've always had issues with, and it confuses me. Moving on to delay. This is the delay that I use. It is very short. I can actually even turn it up to probably like 15%. But let me go ahead and put a send on that so we can kind of hear it again. And I have it set to 3 for timing. And of course, again, dry wet 100%. That's going to be the case for every single one of these returns. And I do have it synced as well. And no filter. Filters are cool with delays, but I don't usually want it to be filtered. Then again, our sidechain. So now moving right along to long reverb. Now this is pretty much kind of almost the same as our short reverb. It's basically just a little bit more time. And this would be for sounds that you want to have a little bit more of an impact or even an atmosphere. For instance, you get that nice long tail reverb, and that's something I like adding to certain sounds of mine to where it kind of fills in the background with some noise and kind of helps your mix down not feel bare. And then once again, we are rocking our sidechain. And then we're moving right along to our long delay. Now our long delay is pretty much, again, like kind of the same thing as our short delay. It's the third timing, sync is on, 100% dry wet, feedback 75%. Then when it comes time to my master, really the only thing I have on here is Span. Span is a free VST plugin that allows you to spectrum analyze your mix. And these are kind of the settings I use. I use a block size of 4096. And every once in a while I'll put the smooth on 1/24th, just that way it's like, it's still kind of like individualized, just so I can kind of see what everything looks like. A couple side notes about a few of these things is like the drums. The thing I want to touch base on again is the drums. You know, having these drums filled out and putting in your favorite drums or the drums you typically use, it allows you to save so much time instead of having to like go and find them and look through all your stuff and trying to find those drums that you typically use, or trying to find that clap that you're like, man, like I remember that clap I used that one time and now I can't find it. And it stops you from having those issues, and it also allows you to work much faster because now you actually have the tools at your disposal. I'd also like to add that it's also worth trying to make all of your own samples into your own little sample pack. Like for instance, I have my Deucez Riddim Volume 2, which you can get from my website for only $14.99. But I build all of my own sample packs to where not only am I building my own sound, but at the same time I have all of these tools at my disposal to use. And people are always asking, how do you like make your own sound? How do you like sound the same? How do you build on that? And the thing is, it's literally just using the same sounds over and over again. And I'm not saying that as in like sound design, because obviously I don't use the same sounds over and over again, besides maybe a couple atmospheric ones. But using some of the same drums, some of the same architecture of like your arrangement, doing some of the same watermarks, or even having like a tagline that's your typical one.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Deuces, bitch.
Things like that can help you stand out and make you start having your own sound. So again, now from here, now I'm going to show you guys how to save this. I know we kind of went over it prior, but I'd also like to show it again. So go up to Options, Preferences, File Folder, and then Save Current Set as Default, and you hit Save. And of course you might have to overwrite or whatever it is that you have, or you could even save this by going to Save Live Set. You can make yourself a little folder for templates. Now I'm going to name this one Riddim template because that's the layout that we have. And there we go. So now we have our Riddim template or our default set. And that's about it for today, guys. If you guys have any questions, please let me know in the comments below. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button or maybe even the like button because it might help me get some more views. And thank you guys for watching, sticking it out with me, and being here for me. I appreciate you guys. Much love for the support, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Deuces.
Finish him.